Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Emily Ross, and I work at the UN Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us for this Google Plus Hangout called How to Plus Social Good, Let's Talk 2015. So young as a social good advisor in Nigeria. She's also the communications lead for the Association for Reproductive and Family Health. We also have Hazami Barmada, who's a Plus Social Good connector joining from New York in the States, and she is a social entrepreneur and strategy consultant. Finally, we have Meera Vijayan calling in from India, where she is a Plus Social Good connector, and she is also a youth ambassador for India for sexual violence in conflict at the Youth to End Sexual Violence. So thank you all for joining me. I'm just going to give some very quick introductory remarks to sort of set the scene for why we're talking about 2015. I think the opportunity ahead of us, as I think you would agree, for this year is very significant, with a set of new development goals set to be adopted in September by heads of state, in addition to climate negotiations coming to a head in Paris in December. I think the Ban Ki-moon has said ours is the first generation that can end poverty and the last that can hopefully feel the effects of climate change, and so I think that the opportunity there is great. You know, this agenda that I'm hoping that all of you can talk about, adopted in September, will really build on the Millennium Development Goals, which addressed health and education, poverty, clean water, and other development issues, but will also take on economic and environmental concerns for the first time. It's also going to be a universal agenda, meaning that it won't be considered kind of successful unless it delivers for every single person around the world and kind of leaves no one behind. So, you know, right now there's been about 2 years of consultations as to what this new Sustainable Development Agenda will include. Over 7 million people have voted through the UN's My World Global Survey, and just last month governments kicked off official negotiations for what that agenda will look like. So I think it's safe to say that this is a really exciting year. We're close to seeing what that agenda will look like, and then it will become official in January 2016. So enough from me. I really want to hear from Esther, Hazami, and Meera. And if you wouldn't mind, Hazami, just want to kick it off to you. You know, from your perspective and the work that you do, the networks involved, and you know, why do you see that this year is so important? And you know, why should people really care about getting involved in the movement?
Well, thank you very much, Emily, and I think that was a great introduction. I think 2015 is being framed as a year for action, global action. I think the success of any development agenda and the success of any development goals really relies on the buy-in and the engagement of the people that these goals impact on a daily basis. Far too often, very sadly, our development narratives tend to happen within the confines of walls that don't really reach your average person. And oftentimes, very sadly, these people that are in most extreme areas of poverty, most extreme areas of injustice, and really need development, very strong development agendas, actually don't have access to the basic information that helps equip them with the very knowledge and tools about their rights, about how to advocate for development in various areas. So I think the one key thing with this year, what we're really experiencing from a very grassroots level, is that there is interest, there's a hunger, there's a desire for people around the world to actually not only have a voice, but see that that voice has an impact. I think people, if you look at social media traffic out of the Middle East, if you look at social media traffic a lot of places in the world, there's a hunger for people to have, to be heard and to be influenced, to be able to influence the global conversation. I think one of the things that we also see is that there is not only a digital revolution that we speak about, but there's a social revolution where you see that tools, social media tools, and outlets that are more human-centric and people-driven, user-driven, are now also influencing agendas, and you referenced the My World survey. A lot of online tools are now being incorporated into what used to be kind of more institutional conversations on development. So you have a lot of both UN agencies and civil society organizations that are using, for example, hashtags to get across messages and to unify voices around the world. You also have people that are ultimately looking at media and lack of media accountability and incorrect narratives oftentimes that are being fueled by the media, which also influence decision making, and they're creating their own counter narratives online using these tools. So I think, you know, when you look at, for example, Gaza and the areas there where you have media suffocated, people are starting to advocate on social media. You have digital diplomacy that's happening. You have digital journalism that is citizen-driven in a lot of these places. So the entire development narrative globally has very much changed. And people are not sitting back waiting for decisions to be made for them, that they are advocating. And I think 2015 is a very critical year for people to not only streamline their messages, but I think it's a critical year for government and institutions to realize they have to incorporate these voices. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity.
Wow, Azami, you're really inspiring me, and this is stuff that I feel grateful to work on every day, and I think that you just kind of got us rolling with a really strong inspirational push for global action and citizen engagement on these issues. So thank you. I'd now like to shift gears a little bit and hear from my colleague Esther here. You know, can you share a little bit? I've spoken a little bit about how the next development agenda will build on the Millennium Development Goals, which is the agenda, obviously, that was set in the year 2000 for 15 years. Can you speak a little bit about what the significance of the Millennium Development Goals have been from your perspective, and maybe what this agenda needs to do to build on them moving forward?
Right. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Greetings from Abuja, and I'm excited to join this meeting. I think the MDGs was a very important tool that helped to define development, especially in developing countries, and help to, you know, push forward for where developing countries can finance, how they can finance our development. Unfortunately for Nigeria, we did not meet most of the goals. We are hoping that these new goals coming up, that we'll have a more country-specific target that we can achieve as a country. I think the MDGs also helped us to understand development as it is, as it affects us in Nigeria, and as also affected other people in part of Africa. It was significant because it helped us to hold our government accountable to the promise they made, although it was a bit difficult because the targets were ambiguous, they were not sometimes country-specific. So our government failed in so many ways. And we hope that these new development goals we're going to have this year will have a more collective voices of people who were marginalized in the previous goals, and also see how they can also help government to achieve those targets, because it's going to be country-specific, and work collectively to achieve, you know, a target. The MDG really helped us a lot. It gives, although a lot of people were not involved in the planning of the MDGs when it started, I didn't even hear about it when I was growing up. But I'm happy it's ending. I'm happy a new one is coming up, and we are actively participating in shaping how it's going to come out. And we thank God for technology for helping us to share these voices. And we hope that we have a better goal and we work together to achieve them.
Thank you so much. And Esther, you actually just brought up some points in terms of people not knowing about the Millennium Development Goals that I'm going to, after we hear from Mira, that I'm actually really hoping to revisit. So Mira, thank you so much for joining us. It must be very late at night. I'd love to hear from your perspective in India, a similar question that I asked Esther, but what are you really hoping to see from the next framework? And I understand that you're maybe working with youth and young women in your country as well, and what do you see as the role of youth in delivering on the next agenda?
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for that introduction. And I would definitely echo a lot of Esther's and Hazami's words here, in that we are looking at a different global narrative. And when we're looking at the indicators about how we've progressed, India is on track. Yes, we are on track on some of the goals. But if you're saying on track and trying reduce poverty, but here in India, and there's still mass migration to cities in search of employment and urban poverty. Every day we are growing into new. We're trying to solve one problem. We're not kind of finishing that problem. We kind of go to another problem. So what's happened is that even with the government changing, with the government making various cuts in social sector spending or healthcare spending, what we are realizing, or what I've kind of started witnessing here in India, is this new interest in people becoming more self-reliant and self-dependent and taking on challenges and trying to look for solutions in their own communities, using their own skill to kind of develop solutions. And that's really quite an amazing thing in that people are coming forward, more young people are coming forward than ever before to use channels to inform themselves better. There's better accountability, and they are participating more actively in development than they ever were in the past 10 years. So I would definitely think that one of the biggest things I would say as progress since the start of the Millennium Development Goals is not even really that we are going towards looking at each goal for what it is, but rather that we are looking at the role that each of us play in kind of taking charge of these problems and confronting challenges and taking accountability for that.
Thank you. All three of you have offered really insightful perspectives that I think are all very complementary, but really relevant to the context in which you're coming from. You know, right now, I think one of the things that people are looking at, including Richard Curtis, who's a famous film director and campaigner, is how can we make sure that when the goals are adopted in September, that they're actually communicated out to citizens across the world. You know, Esther mentioned when she was growing up, she didn't know about the MDGs. I can say I didn't know about the MDGs until a little bit more recently, and I think that there was a sense that we started a little bit behind. We lost a few years just trying to socialize the goals. So what can we do to lay the groundwork now, whether here in New York, in India, and Nigeria, to really get the goals out to everyone so it becomes something that can really be implemented from the bottom up? I mean, Mira, you talked about people developing their own solutions and being self-reliant. I mean, those are the people I think that are going to ultimately be what we measure if this agenda is success or failure or not, is if people on the ground feel empowered to take action. So maybe if you could each answer, if you want to maybe start, Hazami, we can go in that order, and just about what can people do to communicate about the goals. How can we get this out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing that we have to always keep in mind is advocacy is based on education too. If we really want effective advocacy, we really have to better understand as civil society, as individuals, two things. I think, first of all, what is being done, three things, sorry. What is being done, what needs to be done, and the role that we as individuals play would be the third that I would add. I think, you know, far too often we get caught in this expectations kind of bucket where it's always about what we are expecting of others. And I think while that is very important, and we need to definitely keep on the pressure, because as we know, tangible, scalable, large development does not happen without political will and a lot of money, oftentimes. And sadly, those are very intertwined. I think the more important thing that we need to also think about is also what is the role and individual responsibility of each of us as a global citizen to not only be advocates for issues that may or may not just impact us directly, because we do need global pressure in order to really make sustainable global development. But I think more importantly also we need to think about what we each can do to provide development in that area. We are a global community of educated, empowered, sophisticated, and more than ever interconnected through the internet with access to information at our fingertips. The reality is not majority of the world does not get to enjoy that also. So what is the responsibility that we as individuals have to become kind of outlets, and not speak on behalf of people, but to work with them to elevate their own voices. I think that is important, and we need to also, you know, turn the lens around and to ask ourselves, what is my role and what can I do, and then how can I streamline that with a larger development conversation?
And actually, before I turn to Esther, I just wanted just a really quick follow-up for you, Hazami. I think you make a really important point about not speaking on behalf of people, but elevating their voices, and also the challenges of lack of access to information and technology in a lot of areas. How do you suggest that we reach some of those people that have the most to gain from this agenda, but unfortunately are the probably most disconnected from it at this point?
I mean, to be very frank, as overplayed in some areas as social media is, I think social media is a very, very important tool. And I see that because, I mean, I come up with the most bogus ideas. For anybody that knows me, I'm constantly thinking. I'm very entrepreneurial, and I see a problem and I start thinking about solutions. And the way I connect with my donors, the way I connect with people to join me, because any one of us that thinks that they're going to go far by themselves is foolish, but really connecting with a support community, and I do that all through social media because I'm specifically targeting people that have the same interests, the same agenda, and the same passions. I'm not targeting people through a listserv where they sign up, but people step up and they'll come to the forefront. I think utilizing people's personal tools and personal resources is very important. You connect into people, you identify resources that you may not know. Sadly, a lot of us oftentimes approach ideas with blinders on, and we're looking to go from point A to point B through this process, but not realizing that we may get to point Z because we meet one connection that takes us on a much shorter route. And I think that's where the value of crowdsourcing ideas, in addition to just crowdsourcing for information, but crowdsourcing for ideas comes from. And again, social media is a great place to turn to. I think also looking at opportunities to engage and influence institutions from within, whether through volunteer capacities, whether through fellowships of some sorts, and honestly, just I think the most important thing is to stick to your own values. I think institutions, because they're bureaucratic and large, as well-intentioned as they are, tend to become just that, bureaucracies. And I think it's upon the individuals that work there and engage with these institutions to carry our own values and have that hopefully impact not only the vision and direction, but how we actually implement the work so that the humanity of development is not lost in the process.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, Esther, sort of from where you're sitting, what do you think that we need to do to communicate these goals so they become meaningful at a national and local level?
Yeah, I think I agree too that we need to communicate these goals. People need to know those goals so to be empowered to work with the government or hold government accountable to achieve those goals. But technology sometimes is selective. Not everyone is connected by technology. So we need to go beyond using technology to inform people by going to those people where they are. For instance, the My World survey that we did in Nigeria that won the global award, we had to take the surveys to people where they are. Most of them were not connected by technology. Most of them don't have internet, they don't even have light to plug on their computer. So we took these surveys to them. So educating them is taking this into the marketplace, whether it's in the free school, somewhere in remote areas, whether it's in church. When they get it, they become empowered to know that, yes, this goal is important. Yes, this is what they think about the goal. And this is how they want the goal to shape their future. And this is how they want the government to work with the government accountable. So education is key. But education, like I said, has to go beyond just using technology. We need to meet them where they are and give them the information. I think for us here in Nigeria, we've seen a lot of interest with social media. We've also seen a lot of interest with young people that are not on social media, that they want to shape their own future. And as we're moving forward this year, we're recognizing that gap, recognizing that challenge, and we're working accordingly to make sure that these people where they are informed about these goals, are informed about the national goals they have as well, because if they don't achieve the national goals, they cannot achieve the global goals. They are also informed about how they can hold government accountable to the national goals and how they can hold government accountable to the global goals as well. So they are all involved in the process again.
Thank you so much, and congratulations also on My World. I've heard about the success of getting the vote out in Nigeria, which is incredible. Mira, I would love your thoughts on getting the goals out in India and kind of inspiring the people that you're working with to take action on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 points that I would like to add to what the main question that came out of, I think the Hazami and Esther both touched upon, and you too, Emily. One of the things is, what if there's no technology what about those communities that don't have access to technology or social media like millennials do, or like young people and who are in cities do? You know, from India, what we've learned is in those areas we capitalize on relationships. Can we influence local leaders? Can we influence local councils? Can we find influencers within communities? Sometimes it doesn't take a household, in a village, it doesn't take oftentimes one cell phone for every person to feel empowered. It takes one cell phone per village for them to be connected to the real world. And we need to start looking at solutions a little more holistically. And what we've learned is that sometimes when we try and find these influencers or catalyzers within communities, it's a huge step in kind of getting those on board, getting more young people on board, influencing people who are very, very different from us. And in India, it's always been that diversity has been both a big boon and a big bane, because we always have differences of opinion. Everyone wants to be represented. And one way of working together all the time is always focusing on building those crucial relationships that are necessary and bridging those gaps. And one big example I can give you is that recently a lot of young people came forward and voted the Aam Aadmi Party in power in Delhi, and it was in news around the world. And they are a common man party, and these are the same young people who voted the central government in power, which was a very, very different, which had a very different ideology. So when you look at the way young people are coming forward and making decisions and questioning leadership, you kind of know the kind of demographic that you're preparing for the world. They are not sitting back anymore and being apathetic to what's happening around them. They are very, very conscious of the decisions they make, and it is in us to make sure that they get the opportunities and the right channels to express themselves and to inform themselves better.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Mira. And, you know, I'm sitting here and really loving this conversation and forgetting that this is online. And so I wanted to make sure that people know to ask any questions using the hashtag Action2015. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'm actually going to ask you guys a question now that came in from Bangalore. The question from Sanjaya is, who are the stakeholders that will play a role in shaping and delivering the new goals post-2015? You know, I think that we've talked a lot right here about citizens, about youth, but I'd love to hear your opinions, maybe 2 minutes each of you. We'll start this way with Mira. We'll work backwards, and just hear your opinion on who the other key stakeholders for delivering the agenda are. So, Mira, over to you.
I think one of the things that people have always talked about in the past few years are better private sector and public sector partnerships. But I think the key is making the government an ally and not looking at the government as a challenge. In a place like India, it's always because of how the political system works or how the justice system works. People often lose faith in the government and kind of do not participate in governance at all. And I think a big, big step would be to get the government on your side and find a way to work with the government, because that's the only way we can achieve scale. And solutions which we need in our country today require that kind of political will to change things.
Thank you. And how about you, Esther? What do you think about other stakeholders and partners for delivering the agenda?
To accept the agenda, we cannot work alone. We need to work with our partners and to make sure that it's very successful. And we're actually seeing people becoming more aware of the development challenges that we're having and understanding to the need to take action, because we have just one planet that we have. Think, for instance, now the climate change issue is happening around. People that are more aware now about the need for urgent action for climate change, because everyone is now being affected by it and we're seeing it. So now and they know that they cannot individually work alone. They collectively put pressure on government and the global community to take action very urgently, and themselves to take action to reduce, the impact of climate change, for instance. So I think we need to work. We cannot work alone. The global south need to work with the global north to make sure that there's equal participation in it, and the older generation need to recognize that the younger generation have something to offer. So that intergenerational partnership is what is very key to this, because like the development goals is going to come in now. It's going to be the next 15 years. I remember when we launched the Action 2015, we had school children who came in who were 15-year-olds telling the government, like, I am 15 now. I'll be 30 years when the goal is going to expire. It's going to be my life. I want to be involved. I want to be able to shape the future. So there's need to have that intergenerational partnership for us to achieve any goal that we're going to have. We cannot forget that. We missed that in the MDGs. They didn't consider that the young people were important, that the development goals were going to shape their future in the 15 years. I was just telling my friend, I was 15 years old when the MDG was signed. I'm now the next 15 years, I'm going to be able to participate in that. So that intergenerational partnership, it's so key. We want to achieve any goals for the future.
Thank you so much for bringing that point up, Esther, which is critical. Hazami, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think while I fully agree and echo a lot of what Mira had said, I also think that there needs to be more receptiveness from governments also about the role of individuals. A lot of people end up resorting to different measures because they see that political change is not possible. In some parts of the world where you're an advocate, you go to jail. In some part of the world, there are very, very real repercussions to advocating for social development, whether it's inclusion of youth or inclusion of women, not only within the government sphere, but societal pressures and societal repercussions for voicing your opinions. So I think the reality is that we really have to understand the holistic picture and think about the roles that we each individually play in the larger narrative. Being a politician is not for everyone. Being an advocate is not for everybody. We each have a role to play, and I think that's where sustainability is going to actually be able to happen, when everybody has a role to play, and it's not necessarily the same thing. It's not for everybody. One of the main key things that I think we need to push also for more of is accountability. A lot of young people, there's billion plus young people around the world, and these are innovative, young, visionary people that are oftentimes not connected into the larger development conversations because they do see them as futile exercises that really don't go anywhere. So I think while it's important to work from the top down, it's also very important to work from the bottom up, and I always like to say that we can squish the problem in the middle. We need to have a multi-dimensional, kind of targeted, multi-pronged approach. The private sector needs to step up. The public sectors need to step up, academia needs to step up, and civil society and advocacy needs to step up. But again, that all requires an ecosystem where people's voices and their contributions all matter and they go towards the same global agenda. We need to stop having very siloed approaches to development. And one of the big things, from the region, and I'm from the Middle East, North Africa, I'm half Syrian, half Palestinian, and it baffles me when I'm in conversations on development and we don't look at the disease. We're looking at the symptoms. We're talking about extremism and countering extremism among young people without looking at the root cause of extremism, which oftentimes comes from when you have your human rights stripped from you. You have no dignity. There's no sight of a positive future. You're living in poverty. All of these issues lead to a lot of the ills of the world, and there are many. We're living in a time where abundance of ills around us, but I think we really need to stop looking at just symptoms and start treating and curing the diseases, which is a comprehensive collective effort.
So I'm really disappointed that this is ending in a minute, because I think I could talk to the three of you for at least another couple of hours. But I just want to allow you each to provide one last word, kind of an inspiration or guidance on how people can take action and really get involved in the launch of the goals, but then the implementation over the next 15 years. Esther, I'd love to start with you on that.
For me, I think closing, I'd like to note that some countries are going through a lot of changes. like my country is having its own national elections. I think there's also elections in Europe, in Europe, and how that can affect the MDGs signing. We need to recognize that those local political actions can actually affect the outcome of the MDGs in those countries. Like for my country, we're really involved in electing a government that understands development as it affects us young people, understand the negotiation, ongoing negotiation happening in New York, because the government that's going to be elected will be the one that will sign the MDGs into and work with that government or not. So we need to understand this kind of in-country dynamics that can affect development as well. And for us now, we're very, very involved in the elections. We're mobilizing people to go and vote who they want to vote, mobilize them to protect their vote, mobilize them to make sure that when their vote is counted, they are holding their elected officers accountable. We're changing the political landscape of the country because we believe that this is the defining moment of our generation. And for me, it is, because I know whoever is going to be the leader of this country will definitely help to lead us where we're going to achieve our goals. So that's what I wanted to flag. I think that this is a very important year for the whole world, and for me, I'm looking forward to the climate change summit, and also looking forward to other events around the world that are going to help affect that. But I'm looking forward to my country elections, where we're going to go out and vote and look up for having a more peaceful society, so development can thrive.
Thank you, Esther. And I hope that your country is safe during the elections, and best of luck getting the vote out. And now, Mira, any final words from you for closing?
Yeah, I think what I want to say is maybe a cliche, but it's very, very true here in India. I think we keep waiting for things to happen and waiting for the right opportunities, waiting for someone to come and guide us, but I think we have to stop waiting and we have to start acting. And it can be in the smallest possible way that we can give back or that we can contribute. But I think more than ever, it is so important today to kind of understand that we are global citizens and embrace global citizenry, so that we can have a collective responsibility over each other. We stop working in silos, and that is so important.
Thank you. All right, Hazami, last word.
I mean, I think having more of these conversations is important. I think a lot of people have the desire to engage and they don't know how to engage. I think, identifying resources and ways that people can acknowledge and identify, ways that they can actually have value is something that a lot of people seek. In my current capacity, one of the projects that I'm currently working on is I'm the communications consultant with the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth at the United Nations, and a project that we have launched, or a campaign rather, that we have launched this year is called apologies, too many campaigns, Youth Now. And ultimately, Youth Now is a global narrative, a global conversation to really advocate for investing into young people, not only investing in young people as in giving them resources, but also giving them the platform to shape the future that ultimately youth are inheriting and are actively creating right now. I think it's too late to involve young people after the development goals are established. They need to be part of the conversation now, which is why our office here has spearheaded this campaign in partnership with UN Department for Social and Economic Affairs to really get that conversation to people, to institutions, to governments, to say what can we each do to not only empower young people, but to give them the infrastructure they need to actually succeed and to address the issues that impact their lives the most. So Youth
Well,
Now.
congratulations on the launch of the campaign. Is it hashtag Youth Now, or?
Hashtag Youth Now. You can connect in with our office from there, and we look forward to engaging you all in conversations on the role of young people in development.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I mean, I would encourage everyone to follow the hashtag Youth Now, follow hashtag Action 2015, the plus Social Good handle, and hopefully this will just be the beginning of a lot more conversations and action to deliver on the agenda. So thank you, Esther. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, Hazami.
Thank you.
I hope you all have a wonderful night, and we'll hopefully talk again soon.
And thank you, Emily, for a wonderful job moderating.
Thank you so much.
efforts.